So and the studies have conflicting results typically. Now it's hard to study because kids' endowments are not random. So we'll use this genetic law, so based on Mendel's inheritance laws. So the basic idea would be that conditional on parents' genotypes, the children's genotypes will be random. So there's a bunch of papers that use this now. And so the data, I'll tell you what the data is in a second. So we'll have a lot of data on parental investments and basically see how it responds to this random variation in the kids' genotypes. And so typical regression that's run in this sort of paper, you have an outcome variable in our case will be parental investments. And then you have some measures of kids and parents' genotypes. So as you know, so you call it a GB. So typically you just run these linear models, okay? And the focus is on alpha. So the reason we can do this study is because the Millennium Cohort study, so it's another cohort study in the UK. So Jamie talked about the NCDS, it's people born in 57. Millennium Cohort study is a more recent study. So these are children born in 2000, 2002. Sorry. Okay, but it's a very large sample, and then recently they have collected saliva samples from parents and kids, and then they have mapped their genomes. Okay, so we don't have the data for the whole sample, but I'll tell you a little bit about about part of the sample. We have these trios. The genome mapped for two parents and for the biological kid. Okay, so now one advantage of this study as well is that's the cohort study that Jamie spoke about. Follow the kids since they're very small, and then there's very little data on what parents do. It's actually even more detailed than the data that Jamie discussed. The Millennium Cohort study has more information about what parents do and about skills and so on. So this research strategy means very demanding in terms of data. So we'll have to restrict our sample somewhat. So we'll use only white families. That's because we're not going to use all the billions and billions of genome physicians, to measure the child and parents' genome. Use some indices called polygenic scores, and they're typically valid for whites. Okay, so only use white families today, and even within white families, you imagine sample not going to be representative because you need two biological parents and a kid. And so you have a single parent, and hard to get the other parent, and so on. So these will be more advantaged families. Okay, but I'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so a little bit of preview of our main results. So parents will reinforce their endowments of the kids. Okay, so and this reinforcement is similar. Reinforcement means in terms of investment. So we'll have some measure of genetic propensity to have higher schooling. That's going to be our main measure. So can use these genome data in many ways. So we'll have many indices. Okay, so the index will have throughout most of the paper is the index that predicts schooling because that's the most predictive one. But towards the end of the paper, we use other indices, other measures of this genome, how well it predicts mental health or cognition or income and so on. But for most of the paper, we'll focus on the index that predicts schooling. Okay, so those children who has some genetic propensity to have higher educational attainment. Okay, so we'll see that the parents are going to bring, and this propensity is random after a condition on the parents' genome. Okay, so we'll see that parents will reinforce those genetic endowments by investing more in their kids. We'll have similar impacts across ages. Now, as the kid grows older, okay, so we'll start also getting more siblings. and that's going to be an interesting part of our paper. So for families with single kids, actually, we don't see any gradient in terms of parental response to kids' genetic endowments. So we only see that in families with more than one kid. Okay? In families with more than one kid, the kid with the better endowment benefits more, because the lower endowment starts getting disadvantaged by the parents more. Okay, and as you get more and more kids, this gradient becomes steeper and steeper. And this is not going to be only because families are different. So there's going to be families are heterogeneous. Some families have more children, some families have less children. So this is going to be true even within family, within a kid. So since we have a panel, you can follow a child and you can see like an event. You can see what happens when they have a new kid, when a new sibling, and then have a new sibling, we'll see what happens. We'll see that parents will start responding more to the genetic endowment. Okay, so then we'll also have like some more results about whether this gradient is monotone, is it always positive, or does it flatten out for higher levels of endowments? And we'll look at other types of polygenic scores, predictors of health, and so on. Okay, so that's the summary. Okay, so I'll skip this. So this is as much as I know about this. So I trust my epidemiologist friend. I'll tell you a little bit about this. Yeah.
Pedro, so just in terms of the one child versus multiple child families. So I'm trying to think through the logic when there's family fixed effects, I guess. So this is really all about substitution of investments across kids with high polygenic scores versus low polygenic scores. Is that how I should think about things, given that
they can say parents can also spend more time with the kids. They don't have to substitute.
I see. So that's not just buried in the family picture.
Yeah, but yeah. So how does this Mendelian inheritance work? So this is just a really layman version of how it works. So we have the DNA here on the right. So that's very big. There's many. So imagine that one position there, and that's the horizontal line. It's called SNP. Okay, so in SNP we have two copies of this. Let's call it gene. It's not the right word, but so we have two copies of this gene. Okay, everybody has this. And something happened to the screen. Okay, so and you get one copy from your mother and one copy from your father. Okay, so of course your father and your mother also have two copies of each in this position. So the copy you get from your father is random. The copy you get from your mother is random. So that's where the randomness comes from. Okay, so in this example, so we have both the mother and the father. We have two different variants in this position. So it doesn't have to be. So you have a capital A and a low A, and just the standard notation. So capital, we have capital letter means the dominant gene. That's the one that gets expressed. The other one is the recessive. It's kind of silent unless you have two recessive. Okay, so in this example, so your parents have two of each, and then they'll pass one of it to you at random. Okay, so you can have 4 cases. You can get 2 capital A's. You can have 2 lower capital A's, or you can have the mix. That will happen in 2 cases. Okay, and so that will happen at random. So that's the basic idea.
So it's kind of endowment is different from birth, where you observe at the start of the birth. And this kind of thing you have to discover as the child grows.
Oh, you'll see. So you'll say, do parents observe this? Probably
it
not.
Depends on their efforts. In some sense, if you interact a lot, you can probably discover the potential. So how do you deal with this?
So I mean, parents. So your question is, what do parents see, right? And then probably they're learning about their kid as the kid ages and so on. So we'll have something to say about this. So, but that's that's the way we think about it. You know, the child is born, I don't know what are the genetic endowments, and then by interacting with the child over time, I start learning about it. Now, eventually it becomes confusing to the parent because it's going to be convolution of the endowment plus my own investments. Okay, so it's going to be some learning process over time. Okay, so how is this how is this idea typically implemented? I mean, these genetic values are used all the time in these genetic studies to study the causal impacts of some gene or some set of genes on some disease or some other outcome. Okay, so typically outcomes are predicted not by a single gene, by many. Okay, so most research uses these polygenic scores, which are indices of these various genes. So you get it from the UK Biobank or some other big data set. So you can construct these indices from there. So they give you some weights. Then we'll go to the genetic data in the Millennium Cohort study, apply those weights to construct our scores. So these scores are just linear functions of these SNPs. And so the title says DCS is MCS. Okay, so we can have these polygenic scores for all kinds of outcomes. As I told you, so we'll focus on education, but we'll also show you some other. Okay, I don't know if I have to convince you more that this is okay. So maybe we can skip this slide. But basically, the idea is gonna, you know, the polygenic score of the child gonna be just half the polygenic score of the mother plus half the polygenic score of the father. And then there's going to be some residual variations, and that's going to be random. And so that's what we're going to use to identify this effect of genetic endowments on parental investments. Okay, so we'll run these regressions. To start with, we'll ignore gene-environment interactions. I'll have a little bit to say about this at some point. Okay, because you know the model is additive, so but you could put some interactions. You know, we'll show you a little bit. Okay. Okay, so Millennium Cohort study. So now we have like 8 waves. So we have up to the 23 years of age, but I'm going to use wave 1 to 7. Oh, there's a question back there.
How are you unfortunately think about interpreting like the EGS for education in terms of like the child production function? We just know that in population it's correlated. I mean, is there any evidence on whether it's better learning or stick to things more, or you just have a higher IQ or all of those things?
Well, I'll show you what the FuGS predicts for kids. Okay, over the whole life cycle, so you can see. Yeah. It predicts all that.
Hey. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I have to say that speaking from my own experience, which is sort of 50 years now old now, so I'm pretty on a bit, right? You know, there seems to be a combination of reaction and guidance as far as the genetic impact of your parental and indeed grandparental influence is concerned. And I'd be quite interested to know whether that has any relevance from your point of view. And the other thing I'd like to say is that in the Share Foundation, we run the Junior ISA and Child Trust Fund arrangement for young people in care at the United Kingdom. And we've come to understand young people in care really, really well. In particular, the insecurity and the isolation that they feel as they go through their adolescence and work with various foster homes in relationships and so on. You know, I mean, the whole issue about genetic carry-through and, you know, what you learn and how that isolation develops, you know, it's really important to understand some of that. And I'm just wondering if you can just reflect on some of those issues just for a moment.
I'm not sure I completely understood your question, but so there's going to be some influence of the PGS I is of the child, that M and F is of the parents. So there's gonna be some influence of the, I mean, this is not gonna be I think your question is more, it's broad. Not about, I think it's not about what I'm gonna discuss here, but so typically there's you can have some outcome of the child. Or their IQ, for example, or whatever, or their earnings. You can read, and then you can see to what extent the genetic endowment of the child is correlated with earnings. Then you say, well, it's a manifestation of not only the genes, but all kinds of things that parents do for you and your grandparents and so on. I thought that was the second point. So I think the idea here is that you capture that with the parental genetics. Okay, because once you condition on that one, this one is going to be random. So, and so yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I can see you've got an allocation for the child, actually speaking with their own experience. In many cases, the young people care. They don't know which family they came from, and maybe, as migrants, maybe, get dropped at a very early age or whatever. Parents.
Right. So it's like the studies of twins reared apart, for example. They don't know where they come from. Yes. So in here, we'll see how the genetic endowments affect the way parents respond to the kid, and it changes the environments the kid is facing, for example. Okay, so that's going to be more the idea of this page.
Pedro, one question though, does the biobank background, policy environment match the data that you have in the Millennium cohort? Because these polygenic scores are viewed as somehow environmentally free, but they're not. They're computing, they're looking at educational attainment on a bunch of simple correlations. So the polygenic score has embedded in experience and policy environments. So to what extent are they matched? I mean, if it's the same thing on the millennial cohort, you're looking at a subset, say, the biobank that's in the millennial cohort, that's fine. But generally speaking, the polygenic score is heavily environmental loaded,
Yeah, yes, the polygenic scores are environmentally loaded, so these gammas that you get
right?
are going to be loaded by the environment.
Exactly. So the biobank would have people from all kinds of environments. And therefore, the importance of the genes from some scores would be very different potentially. So what's you're calculating in the millennium goal.
Yes, and even in my sample, the land-force study is going to be less representative because we're going to be only advantaged people. Okay.
Right.
So that said, I'm not going to interpret the polygenic score as like a perfect measure of schooling. It's still going to be true that residual is going to be random. Okay, all this will hold anyway. So there is going to be, it's going to be a matter of genes. Going to be some the way it's not going to be totally appropriate to look at the impacts of genes on schooling, but conditional on the parents, the polygenic score of the kids still going to be random. So there's going to be some genetic endowment correlated with schooling. The way it's correlated may be affected by the environment. I think that's what you're saying, right?
Well, if the loci are correlated, I mean, you can get up with a lot of complications, not just going to be additive in mother and father.
Well, yes.
Assortative mating and so
I know that. Well,
no, I mean, that's a very important thing. Loci are not uncorrelated in general, right?
the loci are not uncorrelated.
They're going to sort themselves genetic.
The parents sort themselves with genetic.
Yeah, they're not independently there. Those are not orthogonal regressions, is all I'm saying. They may not. I don't know whether you can address it.
There's nothing here that's orthogonal regressive. I didn't say the residuals are going to be orthogonal.
But I'm just saying there's another equation, there's another term missing, which is the interaction, GS mother, GS father.
Yes.
But that's in your residual. You know, that's
Okay, I'll show you some, I'll show you some regression with the interactions. Okay, so, but.
Can I just ask one?
Sure.
Relates to this before we move
Yeah.
on to the results. I won't ask about epigenetics because I could go on forever on that, but you presuming there it's half mother, half father. I thought, I know you're wrong, but some recent results were saying quite a lot of the genes that you're probably talking about are more from the maternal line. So that would alter that 50-50 to something else and could actually alter what your results are, so I don't know whether that's being thought about or not.
I mean, this, I don't know, you get one, I thought you get, this DNA figure, in each position, you get one from each parent. And
Yeah, but
the one you get is random.
I can send you some of those studies that have come through, which are talking about heritability of intelligence factors genetically predominantly coming from maternal line, whether that's to do with the way that they are being influenced during the life, I don't know.
That would be through the environment.
It will make a difference to your results.
What would be the weight? It's sort of 50-50, what would you?
I think it would be through the environment, I think it's not.
No, I'm just curious, but you're suggesting a weight, changing the weight 50-50 or what? 60-40 or what?
Me?
No, she,
Oh, I'm sorry.
it's not to you, it's to her.
Suggesting change, well, I think we don't know what that is, but I'm saying here, some of the more recent papers are suggesting that there is a predominance of heritability from the female side than the male. It will alter what's good in the equation.
I think it's,
I don't know what.
I don't know this very well, I imagine it's environmental inheritance, it's genetic. Okay, okay, so let me show you what we find. So we got some data, and then we have some random investments. Okay, so I'll tell you the types of value we have across these different waves. So at 9 months, it's all parental report actually. So for the first wave, it's not objectively, it's measured by the parents. So it's a combination of the beliefs. It's what you're asking, what Kai was asking, is what parents see. Okay, at all the other ages, it's sorry. This is the investments is always parental report. Sorry. What parents see, something else. So I will not have that. I thought this was the slide about skills. Okay, so forget what I said. So I'll have something to say about what parents see about the skills. Okay, but these are the investments. So I'm sorry, forget what I said. So baby sleeps at regular times. They get vaccinated. They go to the park and so on. And then as the kids grow older, so for the earlier ages, I think it's a lot of time. And as you grow older, you start getting more. You go out, all of this abroad, and then you get the computer and so on. You get pocket money. So you have tutoring, and then but there's still a lot of time. So talking to the kid, being the kid, and so on. So we did it. We can use these measures way by way, but actually there's some commonalities. You can even anchor it if you want. We'll show you this. Or you can link the waves. Okay, so the sample, as Jim was saying, is not quite representative, even if the MCS, but the UK Biobank is not representative, sure. Okay, and then, but suppose it wasn't, even if the MCS was representative, the sample we get is not representative, is more advantage. The whole sample is about 20,000 kids. Okay, so we're going to use about a little bit more than 10% of the sample, because many of them do not have genetic information and on the trios. Okay, so the one we're going to use whites, try to progress a little bit, at least the problem of the different environments. At least we don't use all kinds of races, so we're only going to have whites, and then we will need both parents. So that's going to be fewer. Okay, so you'll see the parents have a little bit more, more education, more likely to have higher education. So almost 68% of the parents in our sample, a little bit richer. So that's going to be pounds per week in income. Then we have cognitive skills of the kid. So zero means it's normalized to zero. So you're better than average, basically. And then the parents invest a bit more. Okay, so this regression is, this slide is not very useful. It's just to say that the weight is half actually in the data. If you regress the polygenic scores of the kids and then the parents, but you have to get half. Just if you're skeptical, you get half. So that's the last column. It's the regression of the polygenic score of the kid and the polygenic scores of the parents. Okay, and so then we did also some sort of balance tests again. If you don't believe this variation is random. Okay, so the regressions will run the regressions of parental investments on polygenic scores of kids and parents, but you can put some characteristics of the household before the kid was born. Okay, on the left-hand side, and so some are balanced, some are imbalanced. So that I mean the main line that matters is the top one, right? The other ones are just two controls. Sometimes you see this process that because we did some multiple hypothesis testing. But you know, the top line in this one's shows mother BMI, a little bit there, but it doesn't survive multiple hypothesis testing. So for many of these variables like tenure in the house or in the house, whether parents are Christian, parental age at birth, height, gestation time, whether pregnancy, and so on. So the little bit of oncology with small effect also does not survive hypothesis testing. So the sample seems balanced. So if you didn't believe this residual was random, I mean, this doesn't prove it, but it kind of suggests it's kind of sort of at least orthogonal to the pre-birth attributes of the household. Okay, that slide was there by mistake. So then Kyle was asking, what do parents see? Okay. Oh, you have a question?
Yeah, sorry. If you use polygenic scores in plural, looks like there are many different types of polygenic.
Oh, this is going to be the schooling, the education polygenic score.
So all of this is just should be one type of polygenic score.
Well, at the end, I'll show you other ones.
Okay.
At the end of the talk.
Okay.
Okay.
It's all down to one type of polygenic score.
Well, yes, for most of the talk is going to be one type of polygenic score. Then at the end of the talk, I'll show you everything as I have time with other polygenic scores.
I was just thinking it'd be interesting to see some of these done individually, like these.
Sure.
By these not necessarily staying.
No, of course, yes, I mean, definitely. I mean, the balance, I think, is going to be the same. We get text biology, but not the other ones. Yeah. Okay, so now before, how, so our argument will be parents will react to these endowments of the kids, but to be able to react, they have to be able to see the endowments of the kids. So do they see it? Okay, so now polygenic scores for schooling predict things. That was the question that there. And then what it predicts, it's cognitive skills. So this is pulling across all the waves so that the column you should look at is the middle. The last one, so the first one is not very interesting because we don't call for the parents. The last one, we also put some background characters. This is too much. So just focus on the middle. So kids with, this higher values of this polygenic score for schooling, they have higher cognitive skills. Now, I can tell you, at 9 months, I was telling Kai, when I started speaking without looking at the table, that at 9 months is parental report. So it's typical things, there's the baby, babble and pick up stuff and so on. But all the other ages is actually some testing. So there's these Bracken tests and so on. Okay, and then up to age 17, when you have the GCSE results. Okay. Okay, so you can do it by age and predicts, at 9 months, actually, kids with higher polygenic scores, their parents don't say the kids do much better than the kids with lower polygenic scores. So maybe they don't see much at the beginning. Okay, so I told you, this is a mixture of beliefs and actual skills, right? But then when we start testing, maybe also more measurement area. So then when we do it at other ages, that's quite predictive. So I think it's reasonable that parents see something, okay? So we also have some impacts on, this is a strength and difficulty questionnaire. So it also predicts behavior. This polygenic score for schooling is also predicting behavior. Okay, so parents, will see their kids behaving better. Predicts parental beliefs about the future of the kids. So this is, there's a bunch of beliefs in this data. So one of them is how likely is it for your kid to go to university or complete a higher education degree? So here on the left-hand side, when they say it's very likely, because most parents say very likely or likely. Okay, so they don't say never. Now, that changes as the creep goes on. Okay, this is pulling several waves. So the last is at 11, 14, and 17. It's pulling across the 3 waves and cluster standard errors by kid, but but the point is that kids with better endowments, the parents also believe the kids will do better. So I think, I think it's sensible that parents see that the kids have something about them. Okay.
What happens if you condition on parents' education?
So-
That education in this regression column too.
Yeah, that's column 3. We condition on parent education on column 3, and not much happens. Yeah.
What do
So
you mean?
it's not there, I'm sorry. So it doesn't say here, column 3 is the same thing as column 2 with parental education, right? And so it's, oh, you want to see parents with higher education predict whether kids are more likely to go to university?
Yes.
Because they do.
I just wonder what does the polygenic score predict?
It doesn't do anything. See, the top coefficient doesn't change.
But to the mother's PGS and the father's PGS.
Oh, that changes, yeah.
That's it, I told you.
Yeah.
That's all I was asking.
Yeah, no, it's true. But I'm not worried about those 2 PDS. Yes. Okay. But this paper is about the kids' PGS. Yeah. Okay, and then they also, the teachers are also asked about how well the kid does in school. Actually, I mean, there's more data than this. So, if you have teacher predicted cognitive skills, they also are higher when the kids has higher polygenic scores, but also their beliefs about how likely the kid is going to be successful so high. Okay, so still in school after compulsory school, and they're more likely to have higher ability friends. Okay. So now the main thing, how do parents respond? Now, as I told you, we have these 7 waves. This is just a pooled regression. Okay, so I'm going to pool all the waves together. And so just to start with, right? And so the parental investments are standardized to be mean 0 standard deviation 1 at each wave in this one. So I can also have some results where I anchor it to have mean 0 standard deviation 1 in only one wave. Okay, so I think I have them somewhere. Okay, so this is the when I told you this was the first line in my result summary, right? So when kids have higher genetic endowment, parents invest more. Okay? So the investments are also standardized. So the kids' endowment is 1 standard deviation higher than the mean. The parents invest 0.05 standard deviations more than the mean. Okay. So they reinforce. Okay, this is wave by wave, a little bit jumpy.
So what's the measure? The measure of investments the same across all these waves? I'm not sure what an investment is.
No, it's not the same. So it varies. So it varies. So we have 2 measures of investment. One, okay. So the investment is all this stuff. So at earlier waves, in the early ages, it's when you pick up the baby and feed them and so on, right? And at later ages, it's when you talk to the teachers. Possibly that's different. But and so at each, so we have 2 measures. One is at each wave, you just take those variables and then you just standardize mean 0 standard deviation 1 at each one. Then we have another one, right? Except for the first wave, all the other waves have common measures. And so you can anchor it. So you can link it all the waves, and then you can have a measure of investment that's linked across all waves. So we also have that one. The result
You're throwing a single number, so which of these do you use?
to anchor it, I use the
Just take column B, for example. Wave 7 years. I mean, you have a lot of measures. So what is the measure you're reporting? I'm just curious.
oh, I'm not reporting it any, so they call it B. I get an index and I standardize the mean 0 standard deviation 1.
So you just form a factor,
I form a factor, yeah.
scalar factor.
Scalar factor. There's a scalar factor for each A.
But then you say they're comparable.
They're comparable, okay, so then I have a scalar factor right now. In D,
Some items are, but the total factor would load on different items.
yeah, so when I link the factors, I restrict the loadings to be the same for the common factors across tables. So I have 2 variables. The ones I showed you there is the factor completely unlinked. Okay, so that I have some slide there where it doesn't, the result is almost the same. Okay, so the reaction seems to be a little at just than at later ages in terms of these investments. Okay. So this is for the anchored factor. So this is anchored in the, when I say anchored, I mean, it's the wrong word. It's linked. All these factors are linked. So I restrict the loadings on these factor loadings to be the same for the common factors across ages. Okay, and so it's standardized at the third, wave 3 when, or wave 4 when they're 11, I think, or I forget, or wave 3 when they're 7. Okay. Okay. So this is a little bit of, we just we just took the model and then we put some interactions between the kids and the parents' polygenic scores. Just make it a little bit nonlinear because it can be these gene environment interactions. I mean, it didn't do much. So these are the marginal effects. This is for cognition. It's a little bit decline for high genetic scores of parents. And so when the mother has higher the genetic score, seems that the effect of the genetic score of the kid and the cognitive skills of the kid is a little bit lower, but it's almost linear. And this is the impact on SDQ is in the marginal effects does not change. Okay.
Well, due to the scaling addition.
You
It's
think,
not linear, or I mean, there's cognition is an arbitrary score, right?
yeah, it's an arbitrary
The
score.
Z-score, so the Z-score, if you're already high on, you're gonna get a diminishing marginal effect.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, it could be.
I mean, but again, totally dependent change. You take any other
I
change
could-
on that scale.
You guys could take another scale. I will try different scales. But there's no way, I mean, I don't know, I don't have a good way to scale the score, so I don't.
Surely, the diminishing return to whatever it is.
Yes,
To a particular index.
yes, but
Which makes.
for the other, yeah, for the behavior is also standardized. This is really linear. There's not even any diminishing returns. For the parental investments is also a linear model. I mean, I don't have to include any of these interactions. Okay, so I'll go on without including these interactions. Okay, so now, the second point was that, so these things that, seem to be stable across ages, a little bit declining, okay, but so I told you, nothing that happens as you grow older, you get siblings, and so on, family structure changes. So this is the response of parental investments to the kids' endowment. We start with something very simple. We distinguish families, or we distinguish kids who have siblings and we don't have siblings. Okay, so the top, 0.0656, that's the slope of this gradient for families where kids have siblings. Okay, and this is the interaction having no siblings. You see it's negative, but to add them up, you get the negative number, but you can't reject 0. So it seems that if you have a single child, you can't reject that parents do not react to parental investments, and then they start reacting when you have siblings. Okay.
So just going back to substitution versus higher total effect, how can we interpret the results in there to sort the two out?
Not here.
Is later.
Later, we can't, because I will not have the other kids in this data. So, I mean, I will not know if parents are investing more. I mean, I guess there's always a budget constraint in terms of time, but I will not see what they are doing with the other kids. I know for this one kid.
Yeah, so there's always an interesting question about sibling fixed effects versus parental fixed effects to control for
Right.
family endowments, but I guess usually they sort of presume that the two are going to be somewhat related because there's no substitution, I guess.
Yeah, but here there's no family fixed effect, there's a child fixed effect. It's coming, it's not there yet. So we'll see we'll see the child having more siblings over time.
Do you have data on adopted children?
No, it's only biological children, but that's a good point. I mean, there may be some adopted kids in this thing, actually. May be really small sample, but that's a good idea.
Yeah, no, that would be a great check to see if they're early, especially if the kid was adopted early.
Yeah,
It's essentially the same kind of observational plan.
yeah. That's a good idea. Think about it. I'll check.
Interesting.
Yes.
And I guess something like 2 or 3% are identical. Or
Twins.
are twins.
Yeah, we didn't use twins. Yeah. But I don't know, once I restrict the sample to having genetic data, I don't know, I probably is gonna be lower than that.
So are these projects for the family?
Organic source, like I standardize them, yeah, to be mean 0% deviation, right? Yeah.
If you're thinking about it, two parents where both have high polygen score education, and by chance, the average of the child polygen score is also very high.
Not by chance, it will be high for sure.
Family that you have less beneficial on the outside, relatively. And then you can compare another family with two low polygen scores on education, then that's not likely bound from that.
Yeah, you're saying there's some nonlinearity somewhere. Yeah, I'll show you a little bit. It's coming. Yeah, not yet. I showed you a little bit already, but I'll show you more. Okay, so this is across waves. So, I mean, we'll see the same thing, although for the first wave, well, we never see any reaction. Okay, then this is 9 months, 5, 7, 11, 4. 3, 5, 7, 11, 14, 17. Okay, so you see for the families with kids, you see some impacts typically. Then they don't really change over time except for the first wave. But then if you're a single child, typically it's negative, and then cancel the other one out, and you can even start getting compensation in the older age. So if you're a single child, and you're 17, if anything, parents compensate. So compensate in the sense they invest less in you if you have really high endowments. Okay? So they stop reinforcing. Okay? If you're a younger kid, there's no gradient, so they don't even reinforce or compensate. If you're a single child. Okay. So now this is if.
But does the role of the parent taken by the school or some other institution? I mean, if the kid is very.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And the point is the parents then don't need to take over because the kid's in a special program. Yeah.
That's
To what extent other institutions can substitute?
We have this in the data, actually. I didn't check if the kids go to a special program and then but typically but you're right. But I think typically they're correlated, right? If parents put kids in the special program, they also kind of put them in the environment. But you're right. So but we have this data, so we can see if they're in special program.
Yeah.
So we have some data on schools. Okay, so this is not only if you have a sibling or not, but it's how many siblings you have. So the more siblings you have, so now the top line is I refer to it a little bit. So the top line is the impact of parental endowment on investment, on kids endowment on parental investments for the single child, and then this is as you get more kids. Okay, so it seems that there's a gradient of those. I mean, we tested. It's different than from being a single child, but it's not really definitely increasing. Okay. Now these are the fixed effects estimates. So this is the same regression, but now we put the child fixed effect. Now, obviously, the sample is more restricted because if you're always a single child, you don't contribute any variation. Okay, but anyway, imagine this is the kids who we're going to get siblings in the future. Okay, so after you enter the cohort, after you're born, we get younger siblings. So older siblings will not contribute anything. Okay. So as you get more siblings, so typically you only get one more sibling in the sample. Okay, so the kids you get 2 are very rare, and typically this happens at the beginning of the sample. Okay, it's not going to happen. A kid is 14, now he has a baby. Okay, so typically they come in the earlier waves. Anyway, this is the full data. And so, to compare it to the other grade, the other grade is 8, 11, 13, right? So it got even bigger. 8, 16, 25. So whatever grade you have, okay, and this response of parental investments to kids endowments is becoming bigger and bigger. You get more kids. And so now we can reject the. So in bigger families, it seems that like the best kid is really advantaged, but the worst kid gets really hammered. As
Is the spacing in age between siblings a matter?
We checked a little bit, but it didn't really matter so much.
I mean, just as a benchmark, first kid is the benchmark. And the second
Yeah.
kid comes along and they at least have a comparison.
Yeah, so this effect is a little bit bigger if you are the first kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the effect of having the siblings is a little bit bigger. If you are the first kid, for the second kid and so on, this gradient is not as large. Yeah. So we did a little bit, but I agree there's much more we can think about. Yeah. So now, how does this happen? I mean, this is kind of a little bit what Pedro was asking, so on, this we don't know. We can just speculate. But maybe parents learn when they start observing your siblings. And then, or maybe there's some, as Eric was suggesting, maybe there's some constraint. Now you have to split your time. Okay, so we don't know how to handle this, but I'll just show you some suggested things.
Well, but one thing is the parents.
Yeah.
Different income back during the study, right?
What income,
So
what?
during this period of observation, it could be relatively stable income for one family and growing it. This is a period when they're raising kids.
Yeah, the income's coming up.
Couldn't you exploit that difference to separate out what you think?
Yeah, we did a little bit. So this is this one. Okay, so this is the fixed effect. So we have income changing over time.
Yeah. right.
So what we did here, we regressed for example, this is cognitive skills, but you'll have like parental investments. Oh man. Okay. We did it. I put the wrong slide. No, this is this. Okay, we ran this regression with parental investments on the left-hand side. What is this regression? So here is cognitive skills. I'm sorry, it's the wrong regression. Okay, but it's a regression of cognitive skills on income of the parent and then income of the parent interacted with the Platini score. So to see, so we're going to see. Now we're going to put fixed effects. So we'll see as quick as the families, get richer, sort of randomly, because the income changes over time. Okay, because the skills change. Okay, and then do they change more? Okay, if the kid is more endowed. So here we always see zeros, but that's not the slide I should have here. Should have a slide with parental investments. That's the one you asked for.
Parental investments and then interacted with siblings. So the number of siblings. It's like a equalized family income.
Yeah, so we also have that one. So first, I only put the one with the parental income. Interactive polygenic scores, it doesn't do anything. So you get this slide. That's why I'm sorry, I didn't have my glasses probably when I did the slide, so I didn't read cognitive skills. It should be parental investment. Okay, but you're right. So it's interesting. So we don't see that resources seem to be driving this. So at least when parents get more income or less income. They don't seem to become more reactive to the parental endowments. But in the model, it's also not, it's also a little bit ambiguous. So about the learning story, again, this is just very suggestive. The only sort of expectation variable I have at older ages. Oh, you have a question?
Yes.
Are there fertility or birth timing effects of like the child PGS on later fertility?
Yeah, we checked a little bit, didn't we? I think we didn't find anything. Yeah, that's a good point. Anyway, if we look at parental beliefs about whether the kid is going to graduate from college, okay, so there's a little bit of the gradient. They're bigger when you start getting more kids. I don't know if this is because the skills are bigger or the kids are smarter, or the parents also perceive that and so on, but. Okay, so, now, is this, somebody asked, is this nonlinear? So the group,
Any child will go to.
no, that child, that particular child, yeah, that particular child. So somebody asked about, is this nonlinear or something? So this is. And this is just putting some dummies for the PGS, just making the model nonlinear. This is for skills. For skills, it's kind of just monotonic gradient. But and then for behavior as well, so kids with more higher PGS and better behavior. But this is for investments. Okay, so, so this is for beliefs. It's also kind of monotonic. Okay, now this is for investments. For investments, if anything, it kind of flattens up. Okay, so this is relative to the lowest PGS. Okay, so at the bottom, this doesn't move very much. Then if you hit quartile 3, it gets bigger and bigger, but then it's flat. So maybe concave. Okay, so maybe parents react more, towards lower values of the genetic endowments. If it's very high, maybe the reaction, it doesn't seem like the reaction is strong. Okay, now, somebody asked about other polygenic scores. Yeah, I think.
Look at the effects of the high polygenic scores, but also from your measurements of parental investments, because you can only eat fruit and all these things that you measure. So the investments are whether you eat fruit or you have a gold.
Not all of them. So some of them we have like that. Many of them are already read to the kid and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't either do it or not do it. So
that's frequency.
They're super smart, or they have a really high potential or semi-high potential. The differences in what you can measure is probably also difficult.
I think that one, maybe you focus on that one. Many of them are frequency. How often you read to the kid and so on. But you're right, it's still discrete. It's still discrete. There's some variation in the data, but you're right. Okay, so I have 5 minutes. So since somebody asked, and then maybe I rushed through some other things, I'll show you, but I think this is interesting to show you what happens with other polygenic scores. Now, of course, I have a ton of polygenic scores, and then I only have 5 minutes. So I'm only going to show you 3, okay? So now the most obvious is to start with is cognition, because this is the polygenic score for cognition. Okay, so run the same regressions. Just look at the second column. If you want, the fourth column is the third column. Column 3 is the one where we put parental education, okay, as well. In the fourth column, we put the cognition score and also the education score, which is the one we've been using so far. So this is how well do they predict schooling. So the cognition score predicts schooling after you control for the parents. And so that's column 2. And then even after I put the education score, it also predicts. And so that's kind of expected because it's the cognition score, it should predict cognition. Okay. Now in terms of behavior, it doesn't predict behavior. It does if I don't control for the education score. But after I control my education score, the education score is more predictive. So if you think it seems like a better signal in that sense, the parents might receive. And this one is parental investments. So I think what's interesting here, parental investments do not react to the cognition score. Maybe it's harder to observe and so on. Okay. And when they react to the cognitions, to the education score. So they don't react to the cognition score, they react to the education score. It must be parents see something more general than just according to skill levels. It's related with also their behavior and so on. So what about, I have some.
How highly correlated are those scores?
Oh, depends. So the cognition and the education score, I think is correlation of 0.5 or 0.6. But most other scores is very, more like 0.1. Okay, for example, with the ADHD is more like 0.1, 0.2, okay? So this is the ADHD score. So I can also have externalization score. ADHD was a bit more predictive, so I can show you that one. So the ADHD, it predicts cognitive skills Okay, but once I put the education score, not much, okay, so. And then it predicts behavior, okay, so. Okay, but parents don't react with EHE score. So. So in the same way that they react with the education, so. And then the other one I think I have here is the income score. The income score is kind of related also to the education score, so it's like 0.6 correlation. And so there, it predicts cognitive skills, but not really behavior after a condition on the education score. It's on its own. And then parents are not so reactive. And so this progenic score for education, it's the one that predicts better. Okay, period, in the UK Biobank, any outcome. But it also seems to be in terms of our paper, when parents seem to react more to whatever it's measuring. So I have many more. So most of the other scores I didn't bring. I mean, I think I would have time to show you, but many of the other scores actually don't predict at all parental investments. Most of them, even the health scores and so on. Okay, so this is my summary. So parental investments reinforce genetic endowments of kids. They're especially strong at the bottom distribution of endowments. I mean, if you believe the non-linearity, okay, so but I'm not going to make a big fuss out of that. I think it's more interesting to look at the siblings results. So this is true mainly for kids who have siblings, not so much true if the kid is a single kid, a single child. And then this is a fixed effects result. So it's kind of within kid over time. As kids are born, these gradients become steeper and steeper. Okay, it seems to operate mainly through the education PGS. Okay, so now we have to do some more work on what kind of models sort of explain these results because we'll be puzzled. Okay, thank you.